A widowed millionaire saw a stranger holding his autistic daughter and fell in love with her. Graham Cole had never let a small mistake slip through his life. At 44, he was a man of flawless precision, the CEO of a leading fintech empire where every decision was calculated through risk models and exact algorithms. There was no room for emotion, no space for error. Until the day he sent his daughter, Lila, to the wrong school. He only realized it when his new assistant, pale and visibly shaken, stammered from the doorway. "Mr. Cole, I submitted the enrollment forms to the wrong school." Brookdale Elementary, a public school known for emotional development programs, not academic excellence. Certainly not St. Marlin, the elite private academy Graham had personally toured, interviewed the headmaster at, and filled out every single line of the application with surgical care. He almost called the school board. But then Lila texted, "I liked my teacher today." 6 simple words, enough to stop his world. He stared out the wide office window, where the city pulsed below like a ticking machine. And then, for the first time in a very long time, he loosened his tie, let out a breath, and said, "Reschedule my 3 o'clock. I'm going to the school." Brookdale Elementary didn't have ornate iron gates or a marble-floored lobby like St. Marlin. Its entrance was a faded teal wooden door, the sign above it slightly tilted in the breeze. Inside, the floors were worn linoleum and the hallways smelled faintly of pencils, finger paint, and cafeteria pizza. Graham followed a kind-eyed secretary down a narrow corridor lined with student artwork. Sunlight poured in through old windows, casting golden streaks across drawings of lopsided houses and scribbly animals, imperfect but full of soul. "This is room 2B," she whispered, gesturing toward a small glass panel on the door. What he saw inside was unlike any classroom he had ever known. No rows of desks, no overhead projectors, just children sitting in a loose circle, some curled on beanbags, others hugging stuffed animals. In the center, a young woman with soft auburn curls tied loosely back, wearing a cream cardigan and worn jeans. She was barefoot in wool socks, seated low to the ground, at eye level with the children, not above them. One little girl sobbed quietly about her dog who had just died. A boy murmured that loud sounds made him scared. The teacher didn't interrupt, didn't correct. She nodded gently, eyes locked with theirs, not in pity, but presence. "It's okay not to be okay today," she said softly. "You just need to feel safe." Graham held his breath. Lila sat near the edge of the circle, not slumped, not vacant. She was alert, focused. There was light in her eyes. He stepped back from the door, hand against his chest. Something was happening here. Not a lesson, not a grade, something he couldn't name, but his daughter already had. That night he cooked Lila's favorite pasta, for the first time in months. As he placed the plate in front of her, she glanced up, cautious. "How was school?" he asked, his voice gentler than usual. She hesitated. Then, slowly, "Ms. Eliza read us a story. She let us draw what the characters felt, not just what happened." He nodded thoughtfully. "Would you like to stay at Brookdale?" Lila didn't answer right away, but after a moment, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. Graham stood alone in the study after his daughter had fallen asleep. On the desk were 2 folders, St. Marlin and Brookdale Elementary. One represented prestige and achievement. The other held the teacher who had looked into his daughter's eyes and said, "It's okay not to be okay." He closed his eyes. Maybe this time the best choice wasn't the one he had planned. Maybe the real answer came from a mistake. Lila didn't transform overnight. There was no cinematic moment of breakthrough, just tiny things. Quiet shifts. But Graham noticed them all. She started sleeping through the night. No more 2 a.m. pacing in the hallway. No more staring at breakfast like it was something unfamiliar. One morning, he heard a sound from the bathroom, soft, almost hidden. Humming? She was brushing her teeth and humming. Days later, she asked if she could bring home some crayons. Graham didn't understand all of it, but he knew this. Something inside his daughter, something that had gone silent the day her mother died, was starting to wake up again. He began dropping by Brookdale during lunch breaks, not to speak, just to watch from the window. Eliza's classroom felt like another world, a world where feelings were allowed, where no one was rushed and no one was forgotten. That Friday, Eliza introduced something called connection time. Find someone you haven't talked to much this week, she said, and share one thing that makes you feel calm. Lila hesitated, then stood. She walked over to Elliot, a boy on the autism spectrum who usually sat alone during lunch. She knelt beside him, reached into her backpack, and pulled out 2 foil-wrapped cookies. "No one should eat alone," she whispered. Elliot didn't speak, but he took the cookie, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, he leaned his shoulder gently against hers. Eliza froze, her heart swelling, and Graham, watching through the door, felt his knees weaken. He stepped back into the hallway, eyes stinging. That night, as he set the table, Lila climbed onto her chair, her gaze carrying something he hadn't seen in so long: trust. "I gave Elliot a cookie today," she murmured. Graham smiled, his hand trembling slightly as he set down her glass. "That was kind of you." Lila looked up, her eyes shining. "He felt like me." He paused. That one sentence, so simple, so raw, cut deeper than any therapist's notes ever could. She had chosen connection. She had chosen empathy over fear. And in that moment, Graham knew, maybe Brookdale wasn't the school he had picked, but it might be the only place that had ever been right. But on Thursday afternoon, while the other children painted and chatted softly, Eliza noticed Lila sitting by the window, pale pink stationery in her lap. She was writing, slowly, deliberately, erasing more than she kept. By the end of the hour, she folded the paper carefully and approached Eliza. "Ms. Eliza," she whispered, holding it out. "Can you send this?" Eliza knelt gently. "Where to, sweet one?" Lila pointed to the ceiling. "To heaven." Eliza took the letter like porcelain. She simply placed her hand over Lila's and said, "I'll do my best." That afternoon, when Graham came to pick up his daughter, Eliza walked up to him, holding a folded piece of paper. "You should read this," she said softly, like a prayer. Graham waited until Lila was in the car with her seatbelt fastened. Alone now by the side of the road, he unfolded the letter. Read every word. The handwriting still trembled, but each line cut like a blade. "Mom, today I painted with sky blue and didn't cry. Blue doesn't feel cold anymore. I sat next to Elliot and shared a cookie with him. He didn't say anything, but I felt warm. Miss Eliza said, 'All feelings are okay, even the sad ones.' I still miss you, but today I'm not scared anymore. Love, Lila." He folded the letter and pressed it to his chest, standing still under the fading twilight. Then he walked to the car, opened the door, and sat in the driver's seat, still silent. Only when he closed the door, enclosed in the privacy of the car, did he finally lower his head to the steering wheel. A sob escaped, raw, uncontrollable. 3 years of buried emotion, 3 years of hiding tears behind meetings and hollow handshakes. And now, everything unraveled, all because of a few pencil-written lines from a 9-year-old girl. "Dad!" Lila's voice from the back seat was tentative. He turned, eyes glassy. She looked at him, honestly, fully. He reached out. She took his hand. "I miss her too," he whispered. "So much." Lila leaned her forehead gently on the seat in front of her. Her small fingers held his tightly. For the first time since Emily died, they weren't grieving apart. They were grieving together. Eliza Hart never planned to become a teacher. 10 years ago, she was a trauma support specialist working in international refugee camps, helping children who had seen war, lost parents, lost homes, lost voices. She knew the look in a child's eyes when they no longer believed the world would be kind to them. She thought she'd do that work forever, until one rainy Monday morning, a phone call broke her in half. Her younger brother Nathan, 11 years old, had been hit by a car walking to school. Everything after that became silence. She couldn't stand the sound of heart monitors, the sterile white of hospitals, or the clipboards full of questions in therapy rooms. Eliza quit. She returned to the city with a suitcase, a small cactus plant, and no plan at all. One afternoon, she walked past Brookdale, a small public school, unremarkable, no LED sign or sparkling soccer field, but there was a paper notice on the door. Now hiring part-time teacher, must know how to listen. Eliza walked in, not because she thought she was ready, but because for the first time in a long while, she wanted to stay. Now her classroom, room 2B, was unlike anywhere else. No timed tests, no behavior charts. There was a wall labeled Feelings Today where kids placed magnets with their names under words like tired, brave, hollow, hopeful. There was a corner called the Loft where students could paint with music, write letters to their feelings, or simply sit and breathe. Every Friday they gathered in a circle to share one thing that hurt or one thing that healed. People called it the soft room. They whispered it behind her back. Eliza didn't mind. She remembered the first day Lila walked in. The girl didn't speak, didn't move, didn't draw, just sat there like she believed if she stayed quiet long enough, she'd disappear. Eliza didn't push, didn't prompt. She only nodded softly each time their eyes met, a silent whisper. You're welcome here. On day 3, Lila sat closer during morning circle. On day 4, she gently touched the edge of a paintbrush. On day 5, she moved her magnet under quiet instead of invisible. And to Eliza, that was everything. Graham started staying longer at Brookdale after meetings. He was no longer just the concerned father by the window. He became the man who wiped the whiteboard clean after class, helped roll up the morning rugs, brewed terrible coffee in the staff kitchen, and lingered just long enough to catch Eliza alone in the hallway. At first, they only talked about Lila, but the conversations wandered past watercolor drawings and behavior notes into memories and dreams and things neither of them had said out loud to anyone else. One afternoon, they bumped into each other at the neighborhood farmer's market, reaching for the same bag of apples. Their hands touched. Neither pulled away. There was no confession, no rush, just something gentle, like the way Lila had slowly come back to life. But then everything shattered on a Thursday morning. Helena Blake, Graham's former mother-in-law, arrived at Brookdale unannounced, dressed in pearls and wielding judgment like a weapon. Her eyes sharp, her steps decisive. She didn't ask for directions. She walked straight through the front office and into the school courtyard, where room 2B was gathered under the ficus tree for their weekly gratitude circle. Lila sat beside Eliza, her head leaning softly on the teacher's arm, whispering, "This is my safe place." The words had barely escaped her lips when Helena's voice shattered the air like glass. Safe? With her? The courtyard stilled. Helena stormed forward, her voice rising with every step. "Who are you? No credentials, no husband, no experience raising a child, and you think you're qualified to be near my granddaughter? You're not a therapist. You're a babysitter wearing borrowed empathy." Eliza stood up slowly, her voice calm. "Mrs. Blake, I understand this is upsetting, but this isn't the place to—" "Not the place?" Helena snapped. "This is exactly the place where you've been pretending to be a mother to a grieving child. Do you honestly believe you can replace my daughter?" Silence dropped like a curtain over the courtyard. And then Lila stood, her small arms spread wide, standing between Eliza and Helena like a fragile shield. "Stop yelling at her," she said, voice trembling but clear. "She's the only one who listened to me, the only one who didn't treat me like I was broken." Helena froze, and then Lila turned to Eliza, eyes full of tears, but unflinching. "If I could choose a mom, I'd choose you." Eliza sank to her knees, hands shaking, words caught in her throat. The courtyard was still. Then, from behind Helena, another voice rose, steady and unmistakable. "That's enough." Graham stepped into view, not as a CEO, not as a polished executive, but as a father who had lost more than most and finally found what mattered most. He walked to Eliza's side, reached for her hand, and said with quiet certainty, "We're not hiding anymore. This is our family." No one argued. They didn't have to. The way Lila held Eliza's hand, and how Eliza held it back, said more than words ever could. That evening, Helena arrived at Graham's apartment, anger sharp behind her every step. She dropped a heavy folder on his kitchen table. "She's manipulating the child," she snapped. "If you won't end this, I'll fight for custody." Graham didn't raise his voice. He didn't flinch. He simply looked at her and said, with a calmness forged from pain, "You've doubted me as a father since Emily died, and I've let you, because I knew you were grieving too. But this time, no." He stepped closer, his voice firm but quiet. "No one gets to decide who makes Lila feel safe, except Lila." Helena's voice cracked. "You'd let your daughter be raised by someone who isn't even her mother?" "I'm not letting anyone do anything," Graham replied. "I'm standing beside the little girl who finally started smiling again, and I won't let anyone take that from her." Helena's grip tightened around the folder. "I'll take it to court." "Do what you need to," Graham said. "But maybe ask Lila what she needs before you try to claim her." The next morning, Eliza sat alone on a bench behind the school. The air was cool, the sun not yet warm. In her hands was a letter, a line between love and duty. She wasn't afraid of losing her job. She was afraid of being the reason Lila lost the only safe place she had. So she left. No goodbyes, just a folded piece of paper on Graham's doorstep. "If my presence costs Lila her peace, I would rather disappear than take away her safety. Please tell her I never stopped caring, and I never will. Eliza." Then she disappeared, as if she had never been there. But the memory of her, the shape of her hand still held in Lila's, remained. The letter sat silently on the doorstep, an unspoken goodbye folded in paper. Graham read it once, then again, then a third time. "If my presence costs Lila her peace, I'd rather disappear than take away the only safe place she has." "Eliza." He wasn't sure if he said the word no out loud or if it just echoed inside his chest. Phone. He called Eliza. Disconnected. He called the school. They confirmed her resignation. No forwarding address, no goodbye. Lila found out that afternoon. Maria, their longtime housekeeper, knocked gently, tray in hand. No reply. Graham sat outside her door for hours, hand pressed against the wood. "Sweetheart," he whispered, voice barely holding, "I know what it feels like to lose someone who brings light into your darkest places. I know what it means to not fight hard enough to keep them." Silence. "I lost your mom. I won't let you lose her, too." A soft sniffle. Then the sound of a lock turning. The door creaked open. Lila stood in her pajamas, eyes swollen, clutching a wrinkled letter. Eliza's. "Let's go find her," she whispered. Graham knelt, pulling her into his arms. "Yes," he said, "let's bring her home." It took 3 days to track Eliza down. The school didn't know. Her friends had no clue. But Graham refused to believe she was gone without a trace. Through an old Brookdale colleague, he remembered something Eliza once said. If I ever leave, I'll find a small place. Somewhere broken things are allowed to grow again. That line led them to a community arts center on the west side of the city, a program for children from difficult backgrounds. Early Saturday morning, Graham and Lila walked hand in hand through the cracked doorway. No polished signs, just chipped paint and the echo of laughter. And there, beneath soft overhead lights, beside an easel stained with watercolor, stood Eliza, her sleeves rolled up, hair in a messy bun, a streak of blue paint across her wrist. She was helping a little boy paint a sun. It had crooked rays and a giant lopsided smile. Eliza turned and froze. "Lila!" The little girl stood still, then reached into her backpack and carefully pulled out a folded sheet of paper, the first letter she ever wrote to her mother, and held it out with both hands. "I saved it, for someone who could read it with the same heart." Eliza took the letter, her fingers trembling. Her eyes welled up as she read the first line. "I never stopped thinking about you," she whispered. "Then why did you leave?" Lila asked softly. Eliza dropped to her knees. "Because I was scared, that I didn't belong." Lila shook her head, firm and clear. "You do." Graham stepped forward now, no flowers, no ring, just the quiet steadiness of a man who had broken and rebuilt and learned how to love what's real. "I'm not here for promises," he said gently. "We're not perfect, but we're real. And we're waiting for you." Eliza looked at Lila, then at him. She didn't need time or more words. She just needed to stop running. Tears streaming, she pulled Lila into her arms, then looked up and whispered, "Thank you for choosing me." A year had passed. The seasons had cycled through the old windows of Brookdale, flowers blooming, leaves falling, snow settling and melting. But room 2B remained wrapped in the same gentle light born from one small clerical mistake. Lila was no longer the quiet girl in the back of the circle. She was now the one leading Friday Feelings Circle, painting posters for Kindness Week, and always making room beside her for a new student at lunch. She didn't talk much, but her eyes always listened. One day, the PE teacher told Eliza that Lila had quietly sat beside a new girl during recess. Because she looked like she wanted to cry, but didn't know how. No one had taught Lila that. But Eliza knew she had learned how to stay instead of withdraw. Graham had changed too, not with a resignation or a retirement, but a shift. He began stepping away from high-pressure meetings, turning down multi-million deals if it meant missing Lila's Tuesday art share. And then an idea came. If Eliza's classroom could help one child find her voice again, why couldn't it help hundreds? Months later, the Brookdale Center for Learning and Emotional Recovery was born, a shared initiative between Graham and Eliza. They didn't call it a therapy program. They called it a recovery space where kids could write letters to their sadness, paint music with their fingers, play in silence, or just be allowed to feel. No deadlines, no diagnoses, just presence, just permission. Under the golden June sun, the courtyard of Brookdale was aglow like a living memory. Banners fluttered in the breeze, balloons floated like unsaid wishes, and children's laughter rang out like a spring stream, mixed with the rhythmic clicks of cameras capturing moments too precious to let slip away. Every seat was taken, and at the back of the crowd stood a still figure. Helena Blake. No makeup, no usual air of pride, just a grandmother clutching her handbag like it was the only solid thing anchoring her. Her eyes scanned the stage, searching until they stopped. There she was, that little girl, Lila. She stepped onto the stage, her braids neat, tied with yellow ribbons that shimmered in the sun. In her hand, a piece of pink paper trembled slightly in the wind. In the front row, Graham and Eliza sat hand in hand, silent in a kind of hope only parents know. Lila lifted her chin, eyes bright, voice steady. When I first came to Brookdale, I didn't speak, I didn't smile. I was just sad, and I didn't know how not to be. Her words, so small and soft, swept through the crowd like a gentle wind through leaves. Everything fell silent. Helena's shoulders stiffened. I thought I was broken, Lila continued, but then someone didn't try to fix me. She just sat beside me, quiet, gentle, as if sadness was something I was allowed to feel. Eliza placed a hand over her heart. Her breath caught. She gave me colors. She gave me music. She gave me silence I could breathe in. No one had ever done that. Lila looked up, her voice calm, even warm. And slowly I started to speak. I started to smile. I started to believe I wasn't broken, just waiting to be heard. She paused and looked straight at Eliza. Today, I want to thank my dad for staying, and I want to thank the one who brought me back to myself. A heartbeat of silence held the moment still. Today, I want to call her what I've always felt in my heart, Mom. The word was soft, but it shattered every wall. Eliza wept. She raised her hand to her mouth as tears rolled down her cheeks. Graham leaned in, squeezing her hand tighter, as if holding the whole world between their fingers. And at the edge of the crowd, Helena blinked. Once, then again. Her face, once rigid and cold, began to slowly thaw, like thin ice under the June sun. No words left her lips. But in her eyes, something close to understanding appeared, something close to an unspoken apology. And for the first time in years, she smiled, softly, faintly, but truly. That evening, Graham said, "Tomorrow I want to take you both somewhere." Eliza raised an eyebrow. "Where?" "Not far, just somewhere you can hear the wind speak." The next day they drove toward the coast, the sky pale blue, waves gentle. Lila danced along the shore, collecting seashells and counting the tide. Graham and Eliza sat on a blanket in the sand. His hand found hers, not tightly, not loosely. The wind caught strands of her hair and laid them across her cheek. "I used to think I wouldn't get another chance," Graham said quietly. "After losing Emily, I stopped living. I just worked, raised Lila, and stopped hoping." Eliza said nothing, just held his hand tighter. "But then you came along," he continued, "not as a replacement, but like a light someone forgot to turn off. Warm, gentle, just enough to help me find my way again." Eliza turned, eyes shining. "You didn't try to fix us, but somehow you did." Graham knelt in the sand. No ring, no velvet box, just trembling hands and a truth too big to hold back. "Please, be my family, officially, not just in our hearts, but in name, in form, in every way." Eliza laughed through her tears. "I think I've been your family for a while now," Graham grinned, "but I want the world to know it." She nodded. "Then yes, I say yes." From down the beach, Lila turned and saw them. "Yes!" she shouted, leaping into the air like she'd just won the lottery. "Dad and Mom are getting married!" Graham looked at Eliza, sunlight glowing in their eyes. And Lila ran to them, arms wide, laughter wide open. There they stood, on the sand, beneath the sky, beside the endless ocean, with nothing but love and everything they needed. The wedding took place on a bright Sunday morning in the backyard garden of Brookdale, the place where everything began. It wasn't lavish, no ball gowns, no high society guests, just those who mattered, a few beloved teachers, close friends, and Lila in a white dress and a flower crown. Graham stood beneath an arch of green leaves strung with hand-drawn student art. His suit was simple, but his eyes held a light he hadn't known in years. Eliza appeared, holding a bouquet of wild daisies, simple, sincere, like her. No orchestra, just birdsong, wind, and the quiet pounding of one heart finding its rhythm. When the officiant asked, "Do you take?" Graham grinned before the sentence ended. "I already did." When Eliza was asked, she glanced at Lila, bouncing on her toes. "I do, with both of you." Laughter, tears, applause that shook leaves off branches. After the exchange of vows, as the applause faded, a warm silence settled over the garden. Lila was wrapped in a hug, Eliza from the left, Graham from the right, the three of them forming a quiet, closed circle of peace. Then someone stepped forward gently from the last row. Helena Blake. She wore a deep velvet dress, her hair pinned up as usual. But her eyes, those eyes that had once only seen threats, now flickered with something else. She had rehearsed this moment all night, in front of her mirror, dropping her lines and picking them up again. And still, now, standing just a few feet away, she felt more unsure than she ever had in a courtroom. Only the weariness of years spent fighting grief remained, and something inside her, pride, pain, resistance, seemed to quietly let go. Eliza saw her, their eyes met, and in that moment there was no past, no accusations, only two women who loved a little girl named Lila, each in their own way. Helena stopped in front of Eliza, her hand slightly trembling as she held a small bouquet of lavender. "I used to believe no one could ever replace my daughter," she began, her voice low and hoarse. "And honestly, I still believe that." Eliza bowed her head gently, accepting the truth without resistance. "But today," Helena continued, swallowing hard, "I realize that some losses don't need to be replaced. They just need to be carried forward through another kind of love, a love brave enough to stay." Her voice broke, her grip on the bouquet tightening. "And that little girl, she's smiling again, not because of me, but because of you." She took a shaky breath. "I was afraid of losing my granddaughter, but I was wrong. You didn't take her from us. You brought her back." Eliza raised a hand to her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. Helena stepped closer, and for the first time, she embraced her. It wasn't perfect. It didn't last long, but it was real. "Welcome to the family," she whispered, and as she stepped back, Eliza saw something she had never seen before. A tear falling down the cheek of a woman who had spent so long trying to stay strong. Their new life wasn't wildly different, but it was warmer. Graham still made bad coffee. Eliza still doodled in her notebooks, and Lila, though growing, always found her place between the two, head on one shoulder, then the other. One early morning, sunlight slanting through their kitchen window, Eliza stepped out of the bathroom holding a pregnancy test. She said nothing, but her smile said everything. The news was a quiet explosion of joy. Lila jumped and shouted, "I'm going to be a big sister!" Graham wrapped them both in his arms, not caring that he was in pajamas, barefoot on the lawn. They prepared in their own messy, beautiful way. Lila decorated the nursery with crayon drawings, babies in bear hats, babies crying, babies napping. Graham fumbled with the crib, dropping screws everywhere. Eliza just sat in the middle, one hand on her belly, the other tracing hope in the air. Spring bloomed across Brookdale, and one night a new cry echoed in a golden-lit room smelling of milk and sleep. A baby girl. They named her Hope because everything had led them here. Graham held her like a fragile miracle. Eliza rested against his side. Lila leaned in and whispered to her sister, "We've been waiting for you. Dad, Mom, and me. We're the best team ever." Weeks later, they returned to Brookdale, this time with Hope asleep in a sling and Lila leading the way. Eliza stopped at the gate, now with a brand new sign, "Brookdale, where children find their voices and grown-ups learn to listen." Graham read it aloud. Eliza smiled. "I think I've found more than a voice." "What's that?" he asked, arm around her waist. "A family?" Lila turned back, calling from the courtyard. "Hurry up! Hope's waking up. We have to tell her how this all started." Eliza laughed. "About a dad who sent his kid to the wrong school?" Graham chuckled. "Best mistake I ever made." And the four of them walked through the gate, feet slow, hearts full, sunlight breaking gently around them. There was no perfect ending, just footprints in chalk dust, a baby asleep in a sling, and three voices telling a story to the newest listener. A new beginning, and this time they were writing it together.